During such uncertain times like these, I'm sure it has taken its toll on a lot of people. You may be feeling a lot of different emotions. You may be feeling more sad, angry. You may have more anxiety. There may be days that are harder to cope than others, days where it's difficult to get out of bed because you just don't see a reason. And when you do get that spark of motivation, you feel like you need to do everything and anything before it disappears. Mental health plays a big role in our day-to-day lives, and it is such a key, important aspect, yet it's continuously treated less than or not even of importance compared to physical health. In this presentation, I will be talking about aspects of mental health. So quick disclaimer, I am in no way a certified or licensed therapist or psychologist. This is just a project that I did for school, and I'm mainly talking about the ways in which we communicate our specific messages. So throughout this presentation, firstly, I'm going to be introducing my project. I'm going to show you some of the key design elements, what went into it, as well as what the final product looked like. Next, I'm going to be going over the goals that I had for the project, as well as the theory that helped me get there. Lastly, we're going to do a quick recap and wrap up. Underdog. A loser or predicted loser in a struggle or contest. A victim of injustice or persecution. You may be asking, why is this important? Well, the big theme that went behind this project was the underdog. This project actually stemmed from an assignment that I did for a media production class, where we were asked to do an interview of somebody that we considered to be an underdog. Underdog defined in whatever way that we saw fit. Now, I didn't really see the underdog being a loser or how Merriam-Webster dictionary defined it. So I decided to find another definition. And the one that I settled upon was anyone who's at a perceived disadvantage, who is perceived by others to be weak, who has a history of failure or challenges. This definition to me not only highlighted the low points, but it still gave some semblance of a victory. It didn't count anybody out completely. And it could be applied to many more people and many more situations, because I believe at one point or another, all of us feel like underdogs and feel like we've been counted out. So when it came to the project, it was all about telling a story. This story in particular was about a person's greatest failure or challenge. The topic of choice that I decided to focus on was mental health. So I interviewed a PLU student who suffers from mental health issues. At a young age, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and then later on depression and anxiety. I asked her questions about how these mental illnesses affected her day-to-day life, such as school, relationships, and life in general. And then the way that I told this story to complete it out was in 3 different ways. The first way was audio, so that would be the podcast. The second was still image, which was a photo essay. And the third was in text form, which was an excerpt from the podcast itself, which went onto the blog that it was shared. So when it comes to the finished project, it looked like this. So there was a podcast that was 15 minutes long. It went both on SoundCloud as well as Blogger. And then the photo essay that I created accompanied the podcast onto Blogger as well as the text export. You get depressed because you're hearing and seeing things that other people are not. You get anxious because you're scared of having to deal with it on a regular basis. It's still very much a taboo mental illness to have. We're portrayed in the media as always the worst bad guy. So what was my idea for this? What were my goals? First and foremost, I wanted to have an open and honest conversation about mental health because I feel like we don't do it enough. So when it came down to deciding on what the 2 main goals were, the first was the bigger picture. I wanted people to be able to connect her story to the bigger picture of mental health. Second, I wanted to take a look behind mental illness and the alienation that some people feel, causing them to not speak out and not talk about their struggles. And the theory that helped me get there was framing theory, When it comes to framing theory, it's, as the picture describes it, always blown away by the power of framing. The way you paint the picture determines how people feel and what they see. If you take a picture of a rally that's going on, it's peaceful, but say there's one part of the rally that's not so peaceful. People are fighting and war is breaking out on that one small place. You have the option to take a picture of the peaceful protest, or you have an option to take a picture of the violence. That's up to you. And that's what is ultimately dependent on your agenda. So when it came to this project, I wanted people to look at the bigger picture of mental health. Here are a few quotes from the podcast itself. We're portrayed in the media as always the worst bad guy. I've had teachers use schizophrenia as an adjective, kind of like how people use bipolar. I don't want it to be a signal for this person needs to go to a hospital, because that's not what I need. So by talking about media portrayal, by talking about school, and by talking about relationships with teachers or other people, I wanted to give people as many opportunities as possible to connect with her stories. So if you found yourself not connecting to anything, your school life wasn't like that, your home life wasn't like that, your relationships aren't like that, you can't connect, I want you to think about why that is. If you can connect with that and you have had some of those similarities, I want you to understand that you're not alone in what you're going through and that other people experience it too. And that you are not abnormal. Normal is, it's an idea. It's not real. It's just what we make of it. So I just wanted people to look at mental health as a big picture. It doesn't have to be just about her individual story. It's how we treat mental health as a society that lead to how we're treated and how we treat ourselves. So for the last goal, I wanted to take a look behind mental illness. So for the photo essay, I decided to make all the pictures of her, but you can't see her face in any single photo. One, that's because she chose to stay anonymous with her stories, and I respected that, and anything that I share or have shared has gone through her first. But when it comes to mental illness, a lot of the times people they just feel like they aren't fully seen. That's why they don't feel comfortable speaking up. They don't feel like they can have those conversations, and they never feel like anyone sees them fully. So, and that's because a lot of the times we put this emphasis on happiness, and if you're not happy, you're not normal. That's why we have smile. And if you're not happy, you're not normal, then you're crazy. If you're different, you're crazy. And this causes a lot of anxiety within a person. She had mentioned that, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia at a young age. This made her feel depressed because she couldn't connect with anyone. And then she felt overly anxious because of the fact that she couldn't connect with anyone, that she felt like she had to overcompensate. And that shouldn't be how it is. And then if you take a further look, there's different colors and different levels of saturation. So saturated colors typically mean a more happy demeanor. So I made sure that some of these colors were muted, had a lower saturation. Because when it comes to depression, a lot of the times you feel apathetic, you feel sad, you feel low. We associate those feelings with darker colors and darker shadows. So that was what was important to showcase in that. And then if you look at the word crazy, right above it, she has a little bit overly saturated orange shirt. And when we oversaturate things, it happens to make the eye feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's overly out there. And I think when people think about schizophrenia, they typically think about the out there aspects of it and the scary parts, and you see delusions, you hear things, and they don't understand that just because it's uncomfortable for you doesn't mean that it's not uncomfortable for the person. It's just their life, and that's something that they have to go through in order to manage those challenges and those disadvantages that were put in front of them. And I can sit here all day and talk about the different hidden little marks and details, how I cropped a photo, why I chose what angle, but at the end of the day, it is you that determines how you view the photo. I can only frame it, but you interpret it. Just because you can't see mental illness like you can see a broken bone doesn't mean it's not as detrimental or devastating to a family or an individual. Just because we can't see mental illness doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that maybe you haven't experienced it in the ways that other people have. And I'm hoping that after everything that's happened with this pandemic and everything like that, people can learn to empathize more. Or maybe just by listening to the podcast, you may not fully understand, but you can acknowledge that the challenges that someone faces are challenges, and they're painful and they hurt and they're real to them, even if they aren't necessarily the same for you. So when it comes to the finished product, if you guys want to check it out, the podcast will be linked below, as well as the photo essay and a link to the blogger, which has the little expert from it, but that is also in this presentation, so you've already seen it. Alright, that was a lot, but what I want you guys to take away from this is that, one, we went through the project. I was able to show you guys a little bit about the designs and the little aspects of that. Two, we went through the goals and the theories. So we talked about the bigger picture, we talked about the loneliness and alienation behind mental illnesses, and then we also talked about the theory, so framing theory. How you frame a situation or an experience determines how you, the viewer, might see it. And then lastly, I want you guys to know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So now is the best time to talk about mental health and have open and honest conversations. And like I was saying at the beginning, during this uncertain time, people are feeling a lot of certain ways, you yourself included. Be open, have a conversation. All right, have a good day.